As far as most movies and shows are concerned, if you want to change your life, all you need to do is change your look.
What you need is a makeover.
A new outfit or entire wardrobe and updated hairdo can do wonders for confidence and is often used to externally signify a big internal shift taking place in a character. These montages are often a lot of fun moments of movie magic that make us wish we could live that fairy tale too, but there's one big part of changing your entire look that these movies and shows often leave out: the price tag.
Declined. Really? Could you try it again? Really declined.
So let's take a look at the finances behind some of our favorite movie makeovers, from the perfectly obtainable to the only on film totally unrealistic but still fun, and uncover what these makeover montages really tell us about creating a new and improved you.
Who is that sad little person? Are we doing a before and after piece I don't know about?
As we covered in our video on the ugly pretty girl trope, on screen the characters that get these makeovers are pretty much always played by beautiful actresses who are just dressed down a tiny bit to look more normal, which is the hideous before.
Guys, she's got glasses and a ponytail. Oh, look at that. She's got paint on her overalls. What is that?
While movies and shows can get a little ridiculous with this part of the trope, it is true that just a few small tweaks can change your look. And given that our faces are what we show to the world every day, the conduit through which we express our emotions, it's not surprising that people often tend to zero in on them and what they want to change about them.
Pores are huge.
One thing movies seem to hate is glasses.
Do you wear contact lens?
Well, I have them, but I don't really like to wear them that much.
Now you do.
There is a belief that glasses are always holding the character back from reaching their true beauty potential. So what if she can't see? It's more important that everyone else can see her, right? On top of how ridiculous that is as a concept, the trope also always just glosses over a pretty huge financial issue. Glasses themselves are often already pretty expensive. When you add up the cost of the frames, prescription lenses, and the appointment with the eye doctor to get them, they can cost well into the hundreds of dollars for just a single pair. So to have to throw those out the window and get contacts is not a cheap feat, especially since those require a separate exam back to the eye doctor and the purchase of the boxes of contacts themselves. Then there's the skincare. Most of these characters already have Hollywood perfect skin, but there's still usually someone around to tell them that they need zit ointment or wrinkle cream. And as we all know, even when you're buying drugstore skincare, the cost starts adding up quickly. And don't forget about those teeth. Most characters are already pearly white, but of course they need to be a little whiter. While on screen, one whitening strip is usually all it takes to get Chip Skylark level chompers, in the real world you usually need to use an entire box of strips to see results, or even get professional whitening done, which can cost hundreds of dollars. Another so-called problem that movies, especially from the 90s and early 2000s, loved to hone in on is eyebrows.
When was the last time you tweezed? What? Is in your eyebrows.
Never. Why?
Well, did you ever watch Sesame Street? You know Bert?
Nearly every makeover montage saw the recipient getting admonished for their allegedly over-the-top brows and forced to wax them within an inch of their lives. Even nowadays, an eyebrow wax by a professional can cost anywhere from $15 to over $100, and that's just for one visit. If you want to keep up the look, you have to keep paying, or learn to do it yourself, and hope you don't end up having any brow-destroying mishaps. Thankfully, in recent years, people have learned to love their bushy brows, and movies have stopped pushing the idea that anyone whose eyebrows aren't razor thin needs to wax them off, and that having a unibrow is some horrible problem. And then, of course, there's all of that beautiful makeup. This is where the montages usually start to get more fun, trying on lots of new colors and really getting lost in the magic of makeup. A lot of movie makeovers take place at home, with one character sharing their own makeup with the one being made over. Maybe not terribly hygienic, but definitely cost-effective. But others go all out with entire professional glam teams dropping in to pretty much completely change the character's face. Just one professional makeup artist will run you around $100 an hour, and it could be several times that depending on their level of expertise and just how much you want them to change your look. As you can see, a true makeover can start to hit your wallet in a big way surprisingly quickly, and that's not even mentioning the clothes.
Get in, loser, we're going shopping.
To go with their new look, characters usually need new outfits that match their updated vibe. Sometimes this just means buying a nice dress for one event, which can certainly get pricey, but often won't break the bank.
Congratulations, you just got your first slow motion entrance.
But sometimes characters want to change it all and get an entirely new wardrobe, which even if they were doing Temu hauls would likely still add up quickly, but these characters usually hit the mall for a major shopping spree, which likely means hundreds of dollars or even thousands to get an entire new wardrobe.
You clean up real nice.
Sure don't fit in down on the boulevard looking like you do. Not that you ever did.
Well, thanks. But it's easy to clean up when you got money.
Oftentimes in these cases, it's someone else footing that bill, so the character gets all the fun of shopping with none of the bummer of the credit card bill.
You work on commission, right?
Yes. Big mistake. Big. Huge.
The Devil Wears Prada, which reportedly had a $1 million wardrobe, sees Andy getting to borrow and sometimes keep incredibly expensive items, from bags to dresses from Dolce & Gabbana, Calvin Klein, and Chanel.
Are you wearing the
Chanel boots? Yeah, I am.
This is the new Marc Jacobs. This is sold out everywhere. Where did you get this?
Miranda didn't want it, so?
Oh, no. This bag is like $1,900. I cannot take this from you.
These characters often feel like the fact that they're not fashionable enough is a big part of the reason why they just can't seem to fit in. And of course, society is often telling them the same thing.
Just because you don't look like these girls in Poise magazine doesn't mean that you're not beautiful in your own way.
I don't want to be beautiful in my own way. I want to look like these people.
And when they do emerge as beautiful new swans, they usually are treated better by those around them, except their old friends, who often find the new look and new attitude threatening.
You're morphing into one of them. Next week, you could be waving pom-poms in my face.
But while they might have felt invisible before, now with their new look, they often have to worry if their newfound beauty is the only thing anyone sees in them, as if their entire personhood has been wiped away by the change.
The first time you saw me, I was cleaning your bathroom floor, only you didn't see me.
Sometimes the makeover is happening against their will. Someone else has decided that they need to clean up and look hot.
And you have no style or sense of fashion.
Well, I think that depends on what you're...
No. That wasn't a question.
But other times it's something that the character wanted for a long time, but just couldn't or didn't know how to do. Whatever the motivation, makeovers are used on screen as visual markers of larger internal changes happening within the character. When the makeover is against their will, it usually happens at the beginning of the film and is the impetus for their change. It's through stepping into these new shoes, often literally, that they open themselves up to new experiences and grow as people.
And I realized that these women are smart, terrific people who are just trying to make a difference in the world.
When the makeover is the result of a latent desire finally making its way to the surface, the makeover usually happens at the end of the film, a culmination of the character's growth into their new self. Once your new makeup and wardrobe are set, there's always one last piece of the puzzle. Totally changing up your hair.
Your hair should make a statement.
As long as it doesn't say thank you very much for the Country Music Award.
Haircuts are a time-honored way of marking a big change in your life, especially for characters on screen. Whether they just went through a breakup, got a new job, or have just decided they're going to turn their life around, a big hair change is often involved.
Nothing personal, Lainey, but this particular coif doesn't really go with your face shape. What do you have in mind? You'd really have to trust me.
Haircuts come at many different price points, from free at-home DIYs to cheap snips at a local barber.
That'll be $8.
To all-out, high-dollar glam blowouts at classy salons. How much a character spends or doesn't spend on their new do is often decided by what kind of change they're going through. Characters who are finally taking control of their life usually go for the at-home in the bathroom with a pair of kitchen scissors, or even an electric shaver if they're really going for a major change option. They are the ones who are making this big choice in their life, so they want to be the ones to make this physical change to go along with it. With style cuts, it can go either way. Sometimes the character just wants to pay to get a professional to bring their desire to life.
Where?
There.
There.
Other times, they're being pushed into making a change to better fit some idea of what they should look like.
We have to change the color of your hair.
What's wrong with my hair?
While every part of movie and TV makeovers can make us want to shell out some cash for a little update of our own, surprisingly, one of the most influential character changes of all time came from a haircut. In the 20th episode of Friends' first season, Rachel Green debuted a new haircut and it became an immediate sensation. Dubbed the Rachel, women across the country flocked to salons hoping to get the same cut. The do has continued to inspire haircuts year after year, and even has its own surprisingly lengthy Wikipedia page. One obvious thing to consider with movie and TV makeovers is that their expensive nature is kind of the point. They're so entertaining precisely because they're so out of reach, but fun to think about doing. And even if we can't afford to completely change our entire wardrobe, makeup, and hair in a day, or month, or year, these joyful makeovers might give us the confidence we need to try out a few small tweaks or one new look we've been wanting to go for. And even if we don't want to change anything about ourselves at all, it can still be a good time to watch characters switch things up on screen. It only becomes a problem when we absorb the more negative aspects of the montages, especially from older decades, about how we have to change basic parts of ourselves if we want to be loved.
If it's just for myself, shouldn't I be comfortable?
No! Put yourself first in a sexy way.
Or if we feel like we need to start racking up debt to get an allegedly better look. Nowadays, thanks to social media, we can make and share our own makeover montages whenever we feel like it, and get tips on how to change things up without breaking the bank. And even on-screen makeovers have started to change things up in recent years. No longer based on entirely buffing away yourself to create a new, shinier you, now they seek to just highlight the things that already make you amazing, and that's really the only makeover we need.
I am Dumpling. I am Will. I am Willowdene. I'm a beauty queen.
Film and TV love to show partly relatable, partly aspirational lifestyles that actually don't make a whole lot of sense when you really think about them. Of course, we're not always watching movies and shows just to see real life, and it can sometimes work well when media chooses to let go of realism a little bit to have more fun. But this can also lead to some pretty unrealistic ideas about life and money. So let's take a look at some of the most nonsensical finances in media, why we're influenced by them, and how we can enjoy our favorite shows without comparing ourselves to the fantastical examples on screen.
Look, you clearly are living beyond your means. Can you afford that bag?
This was a gift from a very wealthy friend.
That's too expensive for you.
As much as we love our favorite film and television characters, it can be frustratingly distracting that their salaries, or lack thereof, just don't make sense with their lifestyles, especially when it comes to their living spaces.
How in the world can you afford to live in a house like this, Simpson?
I don't know. So often on screen, we see a scrappy young adult attempting to make ends meet working odd jobs, and yet still somehow able to afford a huge apartment in a major city. Part of this is due to the real-world constraints that come with filming a movie or show. Whether it's a soundstage or an actual home, you need space for all of the crew and equipment. So having your character live in a converted walk-in closet just isn't realistic.
This is kind of a lot of kitchen for a studio apartment, but I needed to create it open in this way so that we could actually film that cooking part.
It's noticeable that so many of these shows and movies are set in New York City, a haven for attractive young adults with big dreams. In season 4 of Glee, for example, Rachel and Kurt leave Ohio for the Big Apple, and somehow manage to snag a sizable loft in a lively, expensive neighborhood.
This place is enormous!
For $1,800 a month, we could get a shoebox in Manhattan or this hangar in Bushwick.
These two are students who at the time were still unemployed. When you think of enviable sitcom residences, the wildly popular show Friends likely comes to mind, while Chandler and Joey's setup can be smoothed over by just assuming that Chandler pays for most of the rent with whatever it is he does for a living.
All right, kids, I gotta get to work. If I don't input those numbers, doesn't make much of a difference.
Aspiring chef Monica and part-time waitress Rachel managing to afford their huge apartment is a lot more difficult to square away. This has been analyzed countless times, both while the show was on the air and in the decades since. Friends itself eventually provided an explanation during the run after the writers got hit with so many questions about it. It turns out that Monica inherited the apartment from her grandmother and it was rent-controlled, and so significantly more affordable than a similar apartment would have been at market rate. paid.
But more important, because of rent control, it was a friggin' steal.
So, not a totally unrealistic setup, as some people do have this happen in real life, but definitely not something attainable for the average viewer. The West Coast isn't immune to TV finance magic either. Take New Girl's roommate setup, which is slightly more realistic, with multiple adult roommates with jobs splitting the rent. But given the soaring rents in downtown Los Angeles, the 4-bedroom loft likely would still be over the budget for people with regular jobs, like school teacher Jessica Day. In addition to living spaces, characters' entire lifestyles often seem out of step with reality. Friends even made fun of the fact that its characters always being free to sit around and drink coffee in a cafe in the middle of the workday doesn't really make a lot of sense.
That's weird. I don't think my boss likes me either.
I don't think mine likes me either.
Maybe it's a universal thing.
Yeah, or maybe it's because you're all hanging around here at 11:30 on a Wednesday.
We're also used to seeing characters gathered around takeout boxes and going out to eat, which may seem like small expenses, but as we all know, all those small expenses can definitely start adding up. Take Gilmore Girls. Lorelai comes from money, but is out on her own, and a huge point of contention on the show is that she doesn't want to take money from her parents to make her life easier. She worries about how to pay Rory's tuition at Chilton, but never really seems concerned about budgeting to any degree. Between daily meals at Luke's Diner, ordering pizza, and buying snacks, the mother-daughter duo probably blow a huge amount of cash on just coffee and treats alone, on top of, their actual groceries. Seeing them enjoy takeout and Pop-Tarts is part of the cozy fun of the show, but it can at times feel a little divorced from the reality of what it's like to be worried about money. A more recent example of pure fantasy is Emily in Paris. The titular marketing maven moves to France for work and lives a dreamy, Insta-worthy life. She has a stylish but impractical wardrobe, frequently goes out for food and drinks, and lives in an apartment that in real life would be much smaller.
That is so not a chambre de bonne. Chambre de bonne is like super tiny. You basically can have breakfast, take a shower, and sleep at the same time in the same space.
But of course, the creators aren't striving for realism here, and that's not necessarily a bad thing. It is a fictional TV show after all. But when these worlds that are being presented as so relatable on screen are so far from real life, it can start to cause some problems.
If you're watching a show that glamorizes financial ignorance, there's a risk that you're gonna think that's okay too.
Shopping is often portrayed as a hobby or even self-care.
A little retail therapy before work.
And as much as we can appreciate the fashion, showing characters spending money so frivolously only makes it that much easier for us to also begin to see shopping as a solution to all of life's troubles.
They didn't even need any money. They had magic cards. I wanted one. Little did I know, I would end up with 12.
The use and overuse of credit cards is a common plot point in film and TV, used to explain away the less than realistic finances of hardcore shoppers. But their financial woes often come to a head and are overcome in a single episode, before they continue on with their happy lives. And things definitely don't usually go that smoothly in real life.
You cannot shop your way out of an unhappy life.
In How I Met Your Mother, Lily is forced to confess the truth about her finances when she and Marshall try to purchase a home. It turns out that she's been stress spending and has maxed out 15 credit cards.
You know what? It's fine to penalize me for trying to get an education and build a career, but I will not let you deprive my beautiful wife of her dream home just because
Okay, actually, it's because of your wife's credit card debt.
But after that, it's kind of never mentioned again, and everything seems mostly fine. Emily in Paris creator Darren Star is also behind the iconic Sex and the City, another series full of some rather reckless spending and unrealistic portrayals of living in New York City. Carrie Bradshaw's expensive taste and designer shoe addiction doesn't really seem to line up with her once-a-week column writer's salary. The show does address how she's often on the edge of a big issue, but it never seems to actually affect her in any material long-term way.
It says here that you have $700 in your checking account.
I just paid my credit card bill.
And $957 in savings?
The infamous season 4 episode Ring-a-Ding-Ding that sees Carrie finally fully confronted by her outrageous finances really lays out how ridiculous her lifestyle is.
I spent
$40,000 on shoes and I have no place to live?
But because this is TV, instead of having to sell half of her stuff and buckle down on budgeting, Carrie just whines until she gets her friend to fix her problems by guilting her into selling her own engagement ring. Which was so out of line, even fans were rubbed the wrong way.
That scene where Carrie comes in and says to Charlotte,
Why didn't you offer me the money?
a lot of people thought that was sort of a despicable thing for another person to say to a friend.
We may be talking about fictional people living fictional lives on shows that aren't supposed to be viewed as a documentary or a rule book by which to live your life. But it's been long shown that our understanding of the world is influenced or shaped by the media we consume, also known as the cultivation theory. A 2022 report by Credit Karma found that nearly 40% of young adults put more money towards experiences rather than the essentials like bills. The concept of fake it till you make it encourages spending way beyond our means just to keep up appearances. These otherwise relatable characters give people an unrealistic impression of finances, particularly for young adults entering the workforce. An aspiring journalist might move to NYC expecting to land a taxing but glamorous job at a magazine, find a spacious one-bedroom with a killer view, all while having the time and money to enjoy what the city has to offer. Because if they're not familiar with the city, they'll think it's totally plausible that a stand-up comedian could afford to live alone in Manhattan, or that a freelance writer makes enough cash to live comfortably on the Upper East Side. Thankfully, there are some shows that value the accuracy of a character's financial situation and how it affects their lifestyle.
I mean, we got our places 30 years ago when the Arconia was affordable, but would your parents have a place there or something?
Good God, you don't have to answer that, Mabel. I mean, unless you want to, because I'm also curious.
Only Murders in the Building explains Mabel's living situation by having her essentially working for her aunt. And when that aunt eventually sells the apartment, Mabel is tasked with finding a new place to live and an actual job.
This is the whole apartment? I know. Feels like a palace. 460 square feet all to yourself.
And while we don't see where Season 3's newcomer Kimber actually lives, we do see that she makes her way by holding down multiple jobs.
So, you manage all this? Businesses, TikTok, an acting career?
You know how it is. Being our age in New York, I mean, you have to hustle if you want to make it here.
Broad City in particular has been praised as a more realistic portrayal of millennial women living in New York.
It's a hallway.
It is a beautiful railroad-style apartment in your budget.
Well, where's the bathroom?
Where isn't the bathroom?
Abby and Alana don't have expensive brunches or shopping sprees, and they both have to live with roommates in actually New York-sized apartments. Neither have steady jobs. Instead, they cycle through different gigs like waitressing, house-sitting, dog walking, cleaning, and the occasional startup. Any event or fancy dinner is treated as a rarity instead of a routine. In one episode, Abby hesitantly drops over $400 on a dress for a party.
But that'll be $438.
That's real. There. Let me ask you a quick question. What is your return policy?
But instead of returning it, she proceeds to wear the same dress throughout the season because it was an investment.
That's your total equity? $374? Are you kidding me? You gotta keep more money in your bank account than that.
When it comes to entertainment, most audiences want escapism, not realism, which is, in part, why shows like Friends, The White Lotus, and Emily in Paris are so popular. And why society can't seem to kick its fascination with the phenomenon of escapist reality television. Plus, having wealthy characters, or not wealthy characters who just somehow never seem to have to worry about money, gives the writers more freedom with storytelling, enabling them to put characters into heightened situations while also presenting something aspirational. Ultimately, there's nothing wrong with escapism. It's just important for audiences to understand what's realistic and what's a fantasy, because that's how we protect ourselves from feeling down about our own lives and finances. Getting caught up in on-screen comparisons only leads to negative emotions, self-criticism, and dissatisfaction.
In order for financial literacy to become more mainstream in our society, we have to start writing financially literate television characters.
But even if the gigantic apartments and endless takeout aren't relatable, that doesn't mean they aren't fun to watch. Are there any other on-screen financial mysteries or ridiculousness that you always notice on screen that we left out? Tell us about it in the comments.
As much as Hollywood loves stories about the horrible exploits of rich people, they also love to pump out stories about struggling 20-something-year-olds trying to make it in the big city. Shows like Broad City and Two Broke Girls gained lots of popularity for their depiction of young urban dwellers working odd jobs to afford living in the Big Apple. While both series tried to base their leading ladies' financial troubles in realism by giving them shabby apartments or showing them shopping at Goodwill,
Lots of people cry at Goodwill. You go to France, you eat snails, you come here, you cry.
they still have plenty of time for out-of-work shenanigans and quirky side quests. Even when they are shown at work, they're doing a lot of chit-chatting and questionable activities that, in reality, would probably get them fired. So let's take a closer look at what Hollywood gets wrong and right in its depictions of 20-somethings on screen, why we're drawn to these characters, and the financial and emotional reality of trying to make it on your own after college. Gen Z and millennials, more than any other age group, are more likely to work at least 2 jobs to make ends meet or pursue a creative interest. Some people, notably those who work in finance, have tried to spin this change in the work landscape as a cultural trend in response to the pandemic, coining the term polywork, which feels akin to the corporate rebrand of rose gold appliances.
Did you just come up with a fun euphemism to describe us not being able to survive off of one job? No, this is completely different.
There is nothing hip or cool about having to work multiple jobs because your 9-to-5 doesn't pay you a sustainable salary, the median rent continues to skyrocket, and your once affordable neighborhood is now being gentrified.
Here we go. Washington Heights. What the
It makes sense why so many shows that depict financial hardship are packaged as comedies. The reality and costs of going to school to work in a specific field only to face an extremely competitive job market which will likely force you to work multiple jobs until you make enough to pursue what you're actually passionate about is soul-crushing.
It's just like everybody can tell me what I can't do, but nobody can tell me what I can do.
Which is perhaps why film and TV about struggling friends working odd jobs and getting up to wild shenanigans are so appealing.
You think we're gonna give the shares to the man who wants to pull a mutant from a mystery hole in the bar and live with him?
All right, well, look, I'm just trying to come up with a system.
Sitcoms that revolve around struggling 20-something-year-olds like Friends, How I Met Your Mother, and Seinfeld became such smash hits because they speak to the cultural phenomenon of what it's like to fumble through your 20s.
Welcome to the real world. It sucks. You're gonna love it.
Cities like New York, LA, and London are popular settings for these shows because they're filled with all kinds of characters struggling through relatable situations, like trying to find an apartment within your budget.
Well, what do you think?
It's a hallway.
It is a beautiful railroad-style apartment in your budget.
Many of us dreamed of living in a big city because we watched these shows growing up and wanted to find our own central perk to meet up with our attractive friend group and run into celebrities.
It's one of those. Are you serious?
Or dreaming of landing a job at a fancy corp in Midtown where we impress the CEO with our young and innovative ideas.
Really? I think you might have something important to say about makeup. And I know someone who might be hiring.
Another trend worth looking at in film and TV is the portrayal of working class characters who actually come from generational wealth.
Yeah, I just thought I'd swing by.
Oh, how lovely, lucky us.
Oh, don't worry, Dad's already booking me a taxi.
Which means their financial troubles are superficial at best. Sometimes this portrayal is meant to be satirical. The writers are clearly in on the joke that this seemingly struggling 20-something-year-old can easily call up their parents if they're short on rent.
Till yesterday, I got all of my money from my parents.
Okay.
Does that make you feel sick? Make you not want to talk to me?
However, time and time again, Hollywood has proven its lack of awareness about financial insecurity, likely because historically those who succeed in the entertainment industry predominantly come from wealth and are detached from the reality that most of us have to contend with. Rory and Lorelai from Gilmore Girls are a perfect example of this discrepancy in film and TV. Lorelai is introduced as a single parent who had Rory when she was a teenager, leaving her waspy upbringing and working as a hotel maid until she eventually worked her way up to a hotel manager, managing to buy a home in Connecticut.
Well, we're ordering pizza, that's enough. Are you crazy? You can't watch Willy Wonka without massive amounts of junk food. We're going in.
Even in 1995, her salary as a hotel manager likely would not have been enough to purchase a home of that size, let alone afford to pay Connecticut property taxes and order takeout every night. Fans have theorized that Lorelai likely had a trust fund from her wealthy grandmother, which went into effect when she was 25. Much like Monica from Friends, who was later revealed to have inherited her grandmother's massive rent-controlled apartment in Greenwich Village. However, both Lorelai and Monica's characters probably wouldn't admit that their proximity to wealth, despite how independent they are, has given them and their loved ones a privileged life.
You left the world of privilege to do things your way.
I guess I never thought of it that way.
And you did it when you were younger and had a baby to take care of. I know, it was really impressive.
Lena Dunham's show Girls rocked pop culture when it premiered in 2012 for its satirical, controversial, and often dead-on portrayal of 4 white millennial friends navigating their post-college 20s. Dunham plays the lead character Hannah, who is introduced having a full-on quarter-life crisis when her parents cut her off and her internship won't pay her.
But I have no job.
No, you have an internship that you say is going to turn into a job.
I don't know when.
You graduated from college 2 years ago. We've been supporting you for 2 years, and that's enough.
In some ways, Hannah is the talented, quirked-up, unglamorous younger sister of Carrie Bradshaw. Hannah's struggles as a writer and millennial are relatable to pretty much anyone who graduated from a liberal arts college, but she and her friends are also emblematic of privileged 20-somethings who move into gentrified neighborhoods and always have a safety net to fall on. During its run, Girls garnered both resentment and praise for centering these kinds of narcissistic female characters while still exploring their complexities. As Dustin Rowles puts it, the difference between a show like Girls and a show like Friends, which is also populated with wealthy, privileged characters, is the sense of self-awareness. Dunham, whether she belongs to this class of people or not, understands that they are unlikable. She doesn't want to offer her characters salvation, she just wants us to know they exist, and for all their negative qualities, they are complicated people. The linear narrative that getting an education that will automatically land you your dream job has been peddled for generations. We are told that with hard work and dedication we can achieve anything, inflation and student debt be damned. Pop culture is one of the great peddlers of this myth that obtaining a glamorous dream job is worth the years, or on screen often more like months, of extraneous labor and poor wages.
I swear, this is my break. This is my chance. This is my boss. I'm sorry, Dad, I have to take this.
As Scarlett Harris puts it, a lovable job is also the poorly constructed myth that motivated millennials through childhood and college. Sustaining aspirational media and publishing workers through devalued, no-guarantees arts degrees in the hope that a measly entry-level salary or freelance writing career will allow an approximation of the lifestyles seen on film and television. These aspirational lifestyles extend beyond media and publishing, from Elle Woods defending a star client in court as only a first-year law student.
You're fired. I have no representation.
Who?
To Pretty Little Liars, Spencer and Mona getting jobs on Capitol Hill straight out of college.
All this time and we both end up in the same business.
Not really.
We both sell policy.
Different kinds of policy.
Film and TV often take creative leaps when depicting ambitious 20-something-year-olds taking their first steps out into the adult world. And while it is pretty unrealistic that so many people would land their dream jobs right after graduation, there are young people in real life who get early career breaks after school, often in fields like tech or finance. However, they are a privileged minority compared to most millennials and older Gen Zers in the workforce. When you think about it, modern stories about young self-starters are products of the American dream, which became our national ethos because there were people from all walks of life in the 20th century who were able to grow their small businesses into empires.
To paraphrase the great J.D. Rockefeller, ain't no reward without risk. Who's in, gentlemen?
Or they were discovered by someone in a position of power, changing their life forever.
All you gotta do is trust me. That's all you gotta do.
Hollywood and pop culture cling to these stories because they are true, but they are also extremely rare. In a society that functions through mass production, it's essential that young people have big dreams of entering the workforce, and to be effective, it has to look fun.
I got everyone t-shirts! Work is fun!
Who didn't want to become a toy tester after watching Big or solve small-town crimes as a teenage private detective?
Still, I've got too many questions swirling around in my head to wait until he's willing to share. These questions need answers. That's what I do.
Popular media has come a long way since the golden years of 90s and early 2000s film and TV. Instead of instant coffee escapism and feel-good sitcoms with characters having only superficial money problems, we're seeing more stories that acknowledge the financial struggles people are facing across the board, especially young folks of various identities working and living in big cities. You have protagonists who may have landed their dream job at a high-powered company, but they still live with their parents because their entry-level salary isn't substantial enough to let them rent an apartment.
She said she wishes you'd be more realistic, but I think she's full of crap.
And when they do finally move out of their family home, the next best option is a 6-story walk-up with roommates who are always late on rent.
I feel like all I do is work. I can barely pay my rent. Oh, which is due tomorrow. Almost forgot.
Is Juice Mucha pitching in?
Well, I've been dropping hints all week.
Then you have characters having to work multiple jobs to pay the rent, like waitressing or driving for Lyft.
Yeah, the Capri Sun. You know my heart. No, girl. Those are for passengers.
And sometimes they have to resort to creative or downright illegal methods to find affordable housing.
Look, the whole point of living in a disused hospital is to get a girl on a slab.
No, Sam, it's to save money for a deposit on an actual house.
Or make some quick cash to avoid sleeping on the streets. Broad City's Abby and Alana are friends in their mid-20s trying to make it on their own in New York City. They sloppily balance various minimum wage jobs and throw 420 parties or sell stolen office supplies to make some extra bucks.
So, correct me if I'm wrong, people are paying you to use the free public charging station?
So what? All the great male entrepreneurs do it, okay?
While Ilana's wackier schemes, always seeming to work out in the end, no matter how dire her money troubles, can start to feel a little unrealistic at times. Abby's story of having to work a miserable job in the hopes of maybe getting promoted to something that doesn't totally suck and might pay you a livable wage, not to mention totally putting her real dream job on hold because she can't even really afford to think about it, is something that so many of us can relate to. And their more out there plans to make ends meet help balance out the harsher realities with a bit of fun.
While my partner removes the ear AC, I'm gonna teach you boys about the dangers of ripping underaged bongs.
One show in particular that skillfully explores this kind of realism is the recent Netflix adaptation of One Day, which follows the love story between two college friends as they navigate the trials and tribulations of their 20s. While the story mainly takes place during the 90s, Emma and Dexter's winding career paths and struggles as young adults still resonate with millennials and Gen Zers today. Emma, a straight-A student and budding writer, is faced with realistic financial challenges almost immediately after graduation. Unlike posh boy Dexter, Emma did not grow up with family wealth and ends up working a hellish service job in London.
Welcome to the graveyard of ambition. Loco caliente means crazy hot. Hot because the air conditioning doesn't work. Crazy because that's what you'd have to be to eat here.
Emma's insufferable work life, like so many people's jobs after college, nearly crushes her dreams of becoming a writer. Meanwhile, Dexter gets to gallivant around Europe before landing a job as a TV presenter, but life eventually catches up to him, as it does for all of us in varying degrees.
You know, you've been through a lot in the last few years with your mum. I've tried to understand that, really, I have, but you're just not the person I used to know.
One Day has been praised for its authentic storytelling, and the way it navigates class, gender, and relationships represents a new cultural ethos. Showing characters struggling in their 20s without immediately landing their dream jobs can actually be very comforting for those of us experiencing a similar existential dread. Success is not always linear, nor is it only determined by material gain. Success can look like making a difference in your community.
Got my pickle?
Yeah, extra pickles, they're in there, and a beanie because it's getting cold out.
Or finally coming to terms with who you are.
I'm gay.
Wow, Layden, that's awesome.
Should we hug? I feel like we should hug.
I don't know, we don't need a hug.
And while there's nothing wrong with being ambitious in your 20s, it's important to remember that the economy and job market is not what it used to be, and plans can change. Nothing is guaranteed, and sometimes it may take years, if not a decade, to land your dream job, and who knows, by the time you finally get there, you might have a whole new dream. As we evolve as people, so can our desires.
A table and chairs license from the local authority. I've already checked. I think we get it. It's all here, the business plan. It's all laid out for the next 2 years.
Many of us will have to slog through numerous jobs in our lives before we can truly settle down, if we're lucky. And some of those jobs will outright suck, but there's always something to be learned. And that may be the true measure of success. For a long time, popular culture held that by the time you hit 30, you'd have your entire life figured out, feeling stable with a good job, a nice house, a loving partnership. But nowadays, your 30s often look quite different.
Job hunt is on. This hospital website says I can earn up to $700 and all I have to do is be infected with dengue fever.
Sometimes the lives of characters in their 30s on screen can feel hilariously out of reach. But thankfully, in recent years, we've started to get many more films and shows that are willing to get honest about what it's like to be in your 30s now, the good and the less than stellar.
Welcome to the No Options Club. It's a cool club.
Yeah?
Actually, I'm in it.
Oh.
Most of America's in it. We meet on Tuesdays.
So what do movies and TV get right and wrong about life and finances in your 30s?
This adult stuff is hard, isn't it? I wonder if the rest of the 30-something gang goes through crap like this.
Being unstable in your 20s is often framed as fun and quirky, all just a part of figuring out your life. But once you hit 30, it takes on a very different sheen.
Your 20s are for wild shenanigans.
But aren't you 30?
For a long time on screen, instability and financial worry was a problem for people in their early 20s. By the time characters reached their 30s, they usually had their lives pretty together, maybe occasionally getting hit with an unwelcome surprise.
Phone bill. Carol?
But generally, things were pretty steady. Even into the late 90s and early 2000s, most characters on screen seemed to be doing pretty alright for themselves by the time they made it to the other side of their 30s crisis. And if one was still floundering, they were often specifically pointed out as the hilarious flighty one in a group of otherwise stable friends.
I spent $40,000 on shoes and I have no place to live? I will literally be the old woman who lived in her shoes.
And in many ways, this was sensible, since that was the reality for a lot of people of that age at that time. But even in more modern shows, financial difficulties of characters in their 30s are sometimes just sprinkled in to add a bit of relatability before never getting mentioned again. Like when How I Met Your Mother's Lily racked up a huge amount of credit card debt.
I have 15 credit cards and they're all maxed out.
Only for it to not really end up affecting her and Marshall's lives that much in the end. And on the one hand, it makes sense that comedy shows like How I Met Your Mother might have sought to focus more on fun than consequences. But the constant assumption that being in your 30s equals having everything figured out, or if things go wrong, being able to quickly fix everything, can make people who are getting crushed under the current reality of the world feel like they're the ones that are doing something wrong.
What do you guys live for?
What's up? What?
Like, what gets you up in the morning?
Nowadays, being in your 30s does usually mean you're done with the hunt for entry-level jobs, but that doesn't mean the struggle is over. While trying to find an entry-level job that doesn't expect you to already have 10 years of experience in your 20s is hard, finding a job in your 30s can feel equally impossible.
I have no job. I have no credit. I have no underwear.
Even though we're told that we now need to switch jobs every few years to hope to get enough of a raise to keep up with cost of living increases, actually finding those jobs can be a nightmare. Analyzing 2 reports from Georgetown University, HR Dive's Rick Seltzer concluded the reports identified 3 major barriers for young people seeking quality jobs: rising post-secondary education costs, limited access to high-quality work-based learning, and inadequate counseling and career navigation services. They said these barriers are exacerbated by discrimination.
Is this what you always wanted to do?
No, but I got this job after college and it fit my interest at the time.
It's not pie in the sky, I won't accept anything less than my dream job thinking that makes the search difficult. It's finding any job at all that pays a living wage, doesn't expect you to live in the office or join a cult, and has a functional benefits package.
I'm a bartender who's 30 years old. I don't have health insurance.
And once you do finally secure a job, then you have to live under the constant threat of getting fired or laid off, or your entire company being bought up by a venture capital firm and burned to the ground.
But it'll never be said that Garrett McNeil did not do just enough to not get fired.
A huge factor weighing people in their 30s down now that previous generations didn't have to deal with on such a crushing scale is student loan debt. According to the Institute on Assets and Social Policy at Brandeis University, having ever held student debt curtails wealth at age 30 for everyone by about $8,200, independent of the value of current student loan debt. Even if you do get that stable, well-paying job, a huge part of your paycheck will be going to paying off that loan that's been racking up interest as you've been hunting for the job that degree was supposed to secure you. And this continues to have negative knock-on effects well into your future. A survey conducted by TIA's and MIT's Age Lab found that the vast majority of participants, 84%, reported that student loans negatively impacted the amount they save for retirement. Participants with higher current student loan debt balances tended to possess less retirement savings.
Nick doesn't have a life plan. He doesn't have a day plan. I once found a note he wrote to himself that said, "Put on pants."
Another problem that can begin ratcheting up in your 30s is the fear of aging and the desire to reclaim your youth.
I was having this awful nightmare that I was 32, and then I woke up and I was 23, so relieved. And then I woke up for real, and I was 32.
Your 30s is often when you do start to see those first real signs of aging, like wrinkles that don't go away even when you're properly hydrated, and gray hairs.
Doing so much flinching, it's bad for my skin. I'm getting crow's feet. Crow's feet!
And this fear on its own certainly isn't a new phenomenon, but the amount of things you can purchase to supposedly help you slow down the aging process has skyrocketed in recent years.
Welcome back to 30 Ways I'm Leveling Up My Life in My 30s, Skincare Edition.
Now, it's not just buying a sports car or getting a new haircut, but the expectation that you'll focus nearly all of your energy and money on holding on to your youth, while making it seem effortless, of course. And since thanks to social media, we're also so much more visible to so many more people than we ever have been in history, the pressure to preserve yourself at all costs feels even higher.
Reverse aging. This video has been so highly requested on my channel. I'm 30 years old, but I really haven't aged since I was about 21, 22.
There's also the pressure for women in particular to try to avoid the ostracization that can come with aging. As AARP's Heather Tinsley Fix told Fortune, there's a much higher bar for women to appear younger. Women face a much higher bar with regard to ageism. They experience it earlier and more frequently than men. But the desire to stay looking young isn't just about aesthetics. People in their 30s just don't feel as old as society had long prescribed your 30s to be. There's a desire to keep your outside matching how you feel on the inside, whatever the cost. And on the flip side, while some things like plastic surgery procedures are incredibly expensive, smaller scale items like a thrifted dress or a nice face mask are some of the only self-care we can afford, so we have to make the most of it.
Self-Care Sunday!
We all need somewhere to lay our head, but actually affording that is becoming increasingly difficult. For a long time on screen, pretty much everyone had a pretty decent living situation, if not by virtue of the character's life, then due to the real-world necessities of filming the given show or movie. Even with just a part-time job, or even being totally unemployed, everyone still got to go home to massive apartments at the end of the day. And this has been even more true for characters in their 30s, who seemingly always live in huge multi-story homes with giant kitchens and spacious yards. And for a time, that wasn't so terribly far off from real life.
Before the 1980s, it was possible for a young person to graduate from high school, find a job that was a full-time, that paid them enough for them to be able to buy a home.
But now, things are quite different. We might have imagined our 30s playing out in Lorelei's cozy Connecticut home, only to find ourselves in more of a new girl, multiple adult roommate situation, if we're lucky.
By the time my parents were 30, they already had 2 kids. They had careers with steady paychecks, a mortgage.
As the dream of home ownership continues to slip away from many, some films and shows do, of course, continue to showcase people in their 30s living in those big TV houses, but we do also get more of that variety. From smaller living spaces to roommate setups to even having to move back home because you can't afford anything else.
They've been to college, then out in the real world, and it spit them out like a stale piece of gum, and now they're all back in their old rooms, like you.
Having children isn't the unchangeable expectation it long was. Now, plenty of people decide that that's not the right choice for them. But for those that do choose to go down the parenthood route, they're confronted with a whole new world of ever-rising costs. From prenatal care to setting up the nursery to the hospital stay to the diapers and food and clothes they seem to immediately grow out of to the astronomical daycare costs, it's a lot. And all of that is on top of the fact that given how expensive everything is, both parents often still have to work full-time on top of parenting. And in heterosexual households, this often means that the parenting and home care actually exclusively falls to the mother in addition to her job.
What's the trick to making all this work? I'm trying to stay positive. It just, having it all seems a little impossible.
Having kids can be wonderful and world-expanding, but it can also be draining financially and psychologically.
Children are a
crushing responsibility. Happy birthday.
And things only seem to be getting worse. According to Business Insider, the cost to care for one child in the US in 2024 will be at least $25,714, which is a 41.5% increase since 2016, and costs will likely continue to go up this year. But thankfully, more films and shows have begun to show a more full picture of what it's like to be a struggling new parent, and have done away with the times where we were all meant to pretend that everything was all a breeze.
You didn't say it was gonna be this hard.
Oh, have I made this look easy to you?
When we were younger and unsure, we might have looked toward our 30s as the time we'd finally have everything together.
I suppose it won't matter when I'm 38.
And so actually getting there and realizing that that's not necessarily the case can feel scary. And the financial burdens of your 30s can be a huge drag and make it feel like you'll never be able to catch up.
You were denied a cell phone because you have the credit score of a homeless ghost.
How I got here doesn't matter.
Way more than your credit score.
But the great thing about your 30s is that even if things aren't going your way, you've already had time to work on yourself and figure out what really matters to you.
We have so much talent and excellence right here. And I felt like we didn't have enough spaces to showcase and celebrate that in this neighborhood.
So then you can focus on that and hopefully keep working towards the life you dream of, even if it doesn't end up being what you thought you'd want your 30s to be like in your 20s.
Maybe instead of running in the morning, I'll go for a walk. Slow it down a little. That seems like a good way to start the day.
TV and film have long been mediums that both reflect and exaggerate real life on screen. Most notably, their portrayal of various occupations and lifestyles that often don't add up to a character's salary or a realistic work schedule. We've covered inaccuracies like these before, from lofty TV-sized apartments to workplace comedies where people hardly work.
Oh my God! Okay, it's happening! Everybody stay calm!
What's the procedure, everyone? What's the procedure?
Stay calm!
Though it's understandable why Hollywood takes creative liberties about work culture to allocate more time for plot and fun side stories, it is interesting that most fictional characters on screen seem to live beyond their means.
I made $400 today already. I hired an extremely diverse ethnic smorgasbord of unpaid interns. Turns out, I'm an effective leader.
Let's take a look at some common jobs on screen that seriously toy with reality, what they actually make in the real world, and the few portrayals that get it right. Film and TV can't seem to get enough of the struggling artist archetype. But ironically, their actual struggles are rarely depicted accurately on screen. Hollywood loves protagonists who are idealists with big dreams that become disillusioned when life doesn't go as planned, forcing them to take the unconventional path where they encounter a love interest or zany sidekick. And somehow, many of these characters manage to afford to live in sizable apartments, or even a renovated fire station, and order takeout nightly in some of the most expensive cities in the world, like Paris or San Francisco. The average freelance writer in the United States makes around $23 per hour, which can vary depending on whether you live in a big metropolitan area like New York City. Still, a writer's salary even in a metropolis like New York or Los Angeles often can't cover rent, living expenses, and health insurance, let alone a designer shopping habit.
Well, I decided to investigate this theory I had about shopping as a way to unleash the creative subconscious.
One glaring falsehood in film and TV's portrayal of writers is that so many of these characters are solely supported by their writing careers.
I like my money right where I can see it, hanging in my closet.
In reality, most writers, even those who have written for prominent publications and have won awards, work multiple jobs to pay the bills. As Kate Dwyer puts it, without any other revenue streams, it's highly unlikely that someone could make ends meet or support a family by writing novels. Most novelists have day jobs, and the majority of those who don't are either independently wealthy or juggling a handful of projects at once, often in different mediums like film, journalism, and audio.
난 그냥 나영이라고 불러도 돼?
당근. 근데 이제 우리 엄마도 나영이라고 안 불러.
너 뉴욕인 것 같던데?
Over the years, Hollywood has even gone somewhat meta by centering characters who are aspiring actors.
You think Meryl Streep and Kaylee Cuoco became stars just because they're the best? No. It's because they wanted it the most.
Or seasoned entertainers.
You're forgetting about your third bucket. People from Florida. They love me. And my numbers are strong.
You'll still be doing shows, just not Friday and Saturday.
Showing how cutthroat and dehumanizing the industry can be. Most actors, unless you're Meryl Streep, are constantly auditioning in between shifts. putting together last-minute tapes for agents who barely make it in time for their clients who aren't making them commission.
I think people are going to soon see what I can see, which is actually that Dexter Mayhew is growing up.
Realistically, Joey on Friends probably couldn't afford to live in New York City as a part-time actor, which makes you wonder how much rent money he owed his buddy Chandler.
Of course, we'd have an apartment over the garage where Joey could grow old.
And though Jerry on Seinfeld is an established comedian, making regular appearances at the Comedy Cellar or late-night TV, in real life, his income as a B-list celebrity probably wouldn't afford him that massive apartment or allow him to dine out every day.
I have a sixth sense.
Cheapness is not a sense.
And things are even worse nowadays. Only comedians who sell out big venues or get Netflix specials can even hope to sustain themselves on their comedy career alone. When movies and shows do show any of the struggle that comes with being a freelance creative of any kind, it's usually framed comedically. On the one hand, this makes sense. It is supposed to be entertainment after all. But it can also help create very real misunderstandings about what the lifestyle is really like, which can then, in turn, make creatives who are really struggling feel like they're just doing something wrong, when the truth is that most freelance creatives aren't pulling in enough to pay their bills consistently, much less spend every day at endless brunch. Work procedurals provide a comforting, problem-solving story formula that often serves to romanticize the work, while also framing it as the thing that singularly defines a person's identity.
Healing begins when someone bears witness. I saw you. I believe you.
They serve the idea that our work is our worth, and often completely ignore the reality that most people are overworked and underpaid, and that our jobs shouldn't be the only focus of our lives. On screen, teachers are often depicted as doing A-okay financially. Their biggest problems usually revolve around inspiring their students. Even if we do see that they're not pulling in much money, it's often shown as being worth it because the work is so important. But the reality is very different. Teachers often have to struggle to make ends meet. And on top of being barely able to afford to cover their own needs with their low salaries, are also expected to pay for everything in their classrooms, which can add up very quickly. Teachers' pay hasn't kept up with inflation at all. According to a report by the National Education Association, teachers on average make $3,644 less than they did 10 years ago, adjusted for inflation. On Boy Meets World, Corey and the gang's teacher Mr. Feeney can afford a very nice house, and seemingly has plenty of free time to always just be around. New Girl's Jessica Day is a very passionate teacher who loves her students, but having so much free time for shenanigans and being able to afford to live in a huge loft in downtown Los Angeles, even with roommates, is pretty unrealistic. Mean Girls showed a bit more of the real struggle of being a teacher, both with the difficulty of dealing with young people and Miss Norbury having to get a second job at the mall just to make ends meet.
My Nana takes her wig off when she's drunk.
Your Nana and I have that in common. No, actually, I'm just here because I bartend a couple nights a week down at PJ Calamities.
Abbott Elementary has been praised for its realistic portrayal of the public education system, which is notoriously underfunded. While much of the activity on the show takes place in the teacher's lounge or in between classes, the writers make sure we see just how tired and overworked these teachers are, which feels true to real life. Abbott Elementary's wonderful blend of realism with comedy and characters viewers can relate to is what makes the show such a triumph, and has reinvented the work comedy genre.
I still have to stop and remind myself why I'm still here. It's not my paycheck, certainly not the perks from the people who sign it. It's about the people who show up here every blessed day.
Hollywood also wants us to know that there are benefits to centering your whole life around a career, even if those benefits are exaggerated for visual purposes. One career that's often glamorized on screen is the legal profession. Usually portrayed as charismatic and brilliant, lawyers on TV and film tend to have a lot of free time to flaunt their wealth, and then just swan into the courtroom occasionally to win over juries through dramatic theatrics, while wearing expensive, chic-tailored suits.
Can't take the fifth, Mr. Santana. This isn't a criminal case.
What color was the light?
In reality, lawyers spend most of their time doing unglamorous work like legal research, drafting contracts, and negotiating settlements without ever going to court, which can take months, if not years. The salary range for lawyers is pretty wide and depends on multiple factors, such as what type of law they're practicing, if they work for a corporation or big city firm versus working in the public sector.
What we feel, and what you feel, will determine what happens to the rest of this young man's life.
And where they're geographically located. For example, a local attorney in Albuquerque, New Mexico, wouldn't make nearly as much as an attorney in a major city who works on behalf of a corporation's interests.
I mean, they'll smile at you, they'll pat you on the head, but they are never, ever letting you in.
On Suits, Harvey, a senior equity partner at a New York City law firm, spends his 7-figure salary on designer cars, clothes, private club memberships, and fine dining his uber-rich clients. In real life, senior equity partners do make a lot of money, pocketing around $1.39 million per year. But their jobs also carry a lot of risk, making Harvey's lifestyle choices questionable at best.
Attorney, I close situations.
So you only care about money?
Truth is, I do it for the children.
While Harvey's salary might make sense given his high status and work in the corporate sector, on screen, it seems like nearly every lawyer is living a lavish senior partner life. On Ally McBeal, the titular character seemed to spend more time worrying about her love life than her cases. It was the 90s, and yet is still apparently putting in enough billable hours to be able to afford a huge apartment and endless cocktails. Sex and the City's Miranda also has a suspiciously large amount of free time for a corporate lawyer.
Okay, they don't make Cosmopolitans. It's a Staten Island iced tea.
Is that like a Long Island iced tea?
I think so. Hello, I'm drunk.
One under-discussed aspect of on-screen pay for any profession, including lawyers, is the gender pay gap. Female lawyers reportedly make about 26.5% less than male lawyers. And, of course, the gap is even worse for women of color. We get a more realistic example of the realities, good and bad, of being a lawyer on Insecure. When we first meet Molly, she is a high-powered lawyer in Los Angeles who lives in a gorgeous studio apartment with her dog and closet full of designer clothes. And while Molly is often shown dining out with her friends or dates, or splurging on a luxury Airbnb, we clearly see that she works hard to afford and sustain her lifestyle. In spite of all the hours she puts into her job, Molly learns that her white male coworkers make more than her for doing less work.
I'm thinking about putting a buzz in their ear for a raise.
Right.
You've been buzzing already?
About a raise? What, so they can expect even more out of me? No.
The effect this has on Molly, and her painful attempts to be accepted into the all-boys club, evokes a sobering realism that makes Insecure's portrayal of corporate life feel much more true to reality.
I thought I was killing it. I just... keep going. You know what? It doesn't even matter. I get it. It's an all-boys club. And whatever I got to do to get in, I'll just figure it out. And then it should be fine.
While still retaining its signature comedic prowess.
That's why I make sure my white clients get less on their tax returns. It's reparations.
From Josh Baskin's charmed life as a toy tester, to fictional pastry chefs with perfect hair and makeup, and beyond, work life on screen can be a fancy-free dream packaged in sensual visuals and colorful jargon to keep viewers engaged.
A change of control needs a supermajority in the holding company. Mom got us that in the divorce. He'd need us on board.
Most college professors don't live in a Victorian mansion off campus, unless they're independently wealthy. And even your average architect in New York City makes only between $68,000 to $79,000 a year, meaning instead of living the lavish life, they're probably having to think about getting a side hustle to make ends meet.
I see a life that I know I can have here.
I see a lawsuit.
But that doesn't mean it isn't fun to watch. At the end of the day, movies and shows are meant to be entertaining dreams to lose ourselves in for a few minutes. It can be a problem when they give us super unrealistic expectations about work and life, but when done right, they can help give us the drive to chase our dreams, and hopefully get paid fairly for it. We only had time to cover a few here, so let us know. What other jobs, salaries, and lifestyles do you think film and TV gets majorly wrong? Or right? That's The Take. Click here to watch the video we think you'll love, or here to check out a whole playlist of awesome content. Don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications.